I'm Mrs. Thomas. Welcome to Lesson 2. We're subtracting positive and negative numbers using tiles. If you haven't already watched Lesson 1 of this series, I highly recommend you do so. It's going to tell you what algebra tiles are, how we use them to solve problems, and how you can make your own. Before we can actually start subtracting, we need to learn two different ideas. The first one is what a negative means. A positive one we represent with a yellow tile here, and that represents we have one of something. The opposite of a positive one is a negative one. And to represent a negative one using the tiles, we flip the tiles over and we use the red side. And negative one means we've lost one, we owe one. It's the opposite of having one. All right, but what about a negative one? So you got to know what to do with this when it comes up, because it will. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with what's in the parentheses, which is a negative one. And this negative on the outside is saying take the opposite of whatever you have. Taking the opposite is just flipping it over. So a negative one is the opposite of a negative one, which is a positive one. And there's no end to the number of negative signs we could put on a 1. We could take the opposite of a negative one if we wanted to, because we're powerful. That means we're going to start with what's in the parentheses. Well, we know a negative one is positive. And this number outside, or this sign, this negative sign, says take the opposite. So we're going to flip it over. And a negative 1 is equal to a negative 1. All right, so if we have no negative signs or we have two negative signs, that's a positive 1. It has a positive value. You'd think all these negative signs would make it negative, but remember, each negative sign, you're just taking the opposite each time. If we have one negative sign or three negative signs, that's the same thing as a negative 1. So we're always, if we have more than one negative sign, we're going to simplify that down to what it's equal to, either a positive yellow tile or a negative red tile. All right, let's say we have a subtraction problem. 5 minus 2. All right, in the past, when you were doing more primitive math, you would say, well, I start with 5, that's what I have, and then I'm losing 2, so you take away 2. A lot of people call subtraction take away. This doesn't work that well, believe it or not. I can't bring in tiles to represent this 2, which I'm going to always want to represent every term with tiles. And a lot of people have trouble when they rearrange it. It's really not a very effective way of doing math, but it's very simple and it worked well in elementary school. But now that you're getting up there in the math, you're getting more sophisticated, you need a better way of representing this. And this is what I'm going to have you do. We're going to keep the 5 because definitely we have 5 ones here. But I want something to represent this minus 2. And it turns out that 5 minus 2 is exactly the same thing as combining 5 and a negative 2. Remember what that negative 2 means. Negative 2 means a loss of 2. And isn't that what minus 2 means? Yeah, so by never using this subtraction symbol, every time I see this subtraction symbol, I'm going to want to replace it with adding the opposite. I can use my algebra tiles, and then the technique is exactly the same as in lesson 1. This plus sign means we're combining. If I combine these 5 positives with these 2 negatives, each one of the negatives eliminates one of the positives, and I'm left with 3 positive ones at the end. All right, here's another reason why we don't use subtraction when we're using algebra tiles. This is 4 minus 7. So here's my 4 positive ones. Subtraction says that I should take 7 ones away. Do you see the problem? I don't have 7 ones. I only have 4 ones. So when we're using subtraction, this problem becomes impossible. But when we say, really, this is 4, and I'm combining it, adding it to 7 negative 1s, that I can do. I just need 7 red tiles to represent that negative 7. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 red tiles. And this plus just means combining. I'm combining these 4 positive ones with these 7 negative ones. Combine them together. And remember, every time a positive and a negative come together, they eliminate each other. They add up to 0. So each one of these 4 yellow tiles is going to nibble away at these red tiles until I'm left with 3 red tiles. Since the tiles are red, my answer is negative, and that makes sense because I had more negatives than positives. And that's why subtraction or takeaway didn't work. I took away all 4 and then I kept going, which means you owe me 3. There is no concept of owing when we use all positive numbers. We need those negative numbers if we're going to end up with a negative answer. Before I do some more examples, and I will, I want to give you a word of warning. There's a lot of teachers who know about this trick, but they don't teach it. And the reason they don't teach it is because they're worried of this. Too many kids will see 3 minus 5 and say, oh, I know, I just change it to addition. And they'll do that. And they'll give you an answer of 8, believe it or not. And these are students who are just following rules and not thinking about what it means. Every single last one of you knows that addition is not the same thing as subtraction, right? Don't ever, ever, ever change subtraction into addition. So this is what I want you to do. If you have 3 minus 5, I want you to rewrite it. I like to write it underneath. So the 3 stays the same. Every time I have a minus sign, I'm not changing it into a plus sign. Did you hear that? I am not changing it into a plus sign. What I am doing is I'm pushing it over. I took this minus 5 and I pushed it over and made a negative 5, and then I'm putting a plus sign in front of that negative 5. Can you remember that? So if I had 8 minus 3, 8 stays the same. Every time I have subtraction, move it on over and put a plus sign in front of it. So 8 minus this 3 is the same thing as 8 plus a negative 3. 3 minus 5 is the same thing as 3 plus a negative 5. Do not ever put a line through that and change it to addition. Even some people do this because it's faster, I know, than rewriting it. But you'd be amazed how many people get in trouble with that. They forget the negative and they changed 8 minus 3 into 8 plus 3 and boom, you're wrong. Some more complicated examples. We have negative 5 minus 2. That minus sign we are going to get rid of before we even bring in our tiles. We have negative 5. We're going to push the minus sign over and put a plus in front of it. I'm not putting a plus in front of the negative 5 because this isn't a minus sign. Does everybody see that? This is already a negative sign. But, and this is why I love this technique, that doesn't hurt anything. I still have negative 5 plus negative 2. This doesn't mean anything, but I didn't end up changing subtraction into addition. So I got 5 negative 1s here to represent my negative 5. And I've got 2 negative 1s here to represent my negative 2. And this plus sign means I'm combining. I'm combining all these negative tiles with these negative tiles, and all together, my answer is negative 7. All right, this is one a lot of students have trouble with. 1 minus a negative 4. Now I said we don't want to leave that minus in there, right? So whenever we have a minus, we're going to push it over. We're going to push everything over. The 1 stays, everything else moves over, and we put a plus in front. And look it! We made a negative 4. That's why I talked to you about that at the beginning of the video. But we know what a negative 4 is. This is a positive 1. A negative 4 is the opposite of 4 negative 1s, right? So there's negative 4. This negative in front means take the opposite. The opposite of 4 negative 1s is 4 positive 1s. So negative 4 is the same thing as positive 4. And so this really complicated looking expression is actually the same thing as 1 plus 4, which is just 5. All right, it is time for you to try them on your own. So here's a problem for you. -2 minus 2. Pause the video, give it a try, let's see what you get. All right, did you rewrite this -2? Pushing that -2 over, putting a plus in front, and then you can see, oh, this is just -2 plus -2. When I combine two negatives with two negatives, I get 4 negatives altogether. Let's try another one. All right, getting trickier. Try -8 minus -6. Pause the video, give it a try. All right, so you can see that I brought down my -8, that stays the same. I push this -6 over to the side and put a plus in front. And the -6, the opposite of -6, is a +6. So I've got 8 negative ones, 6 positive ones. I know that these 6 positive ones are going to eliminate 6 of these negative ones, leaving me with an answer of -2. Problem for you to try on your own. -15 minus a -25. Now these numbers are going to be too big to use the tiles, but I'd like you to set it up as if you're going to use the tiles and think about what the tiles would look like even if you're not counting them out. See if you can use that to solve this one. All right, so we took this minus a -25 and we pushed the whole thing over, making this a -25. And we know that -25 is just the opposite of -25, which is +25, which gives us -15 plus 25. So I can see I've got 25 positive ones, I've got 15 negative ones, I've got more positive than negative, so my answer is going to be positive. These 15 red tiles are going to take away from these 25 yellow tiles. And once I've taken 15 of these away, I'm going to have 10 yellow tiles left. How'd you do? Can we do one more? All right, here is your last practice problem. -32 minus 15. Give it a try. All right, we took this negative or minus 15 and we pushed it over. You can see it's still right here. The minus and the 15 are still right here. And we just put this plus sign in front of it. And the interesting thing is since we have a -32 and a -15, these are all negative, right? 32 red tiles, 15 red tiles, we're just combining them. So even though there's a minus in this original problem, this is not a subtraction problem. Crazy, huh? That's why the subtraction can be very confusing. Once you've set it up like this, it's perfectly straightforward. You can see I'm just combining a whole bunch of negatives with more negatives, and so my total is going to be -47. I hope this video is helpful to you. If you are interested in more information on integers, positive and negative whole numbers, try the next video, which is multiplying integers. Thank you for watching.